Crime gangs in the UK. The sheer rate of crime in the United Kingdom justifies an inquest into crime gangs. After all, for every numbered crime, there is a person we refer to as a criminal. It's good to note that many of these crimes are committed by a group rather than an individual. Drug-related crimes, for example, originate from syndicates. Other organised crimes, such as armed robbery, sexual assaults and antisocial behaviours, are perpetrated by gangs. For that reason, we produce this video to draw your attention to the organised crime gangs in the UK. According to the Serious Organised Crime Agency, these organised crimes are concentrated around London, Manchester and Liverpool, among other places and parts of the UK, as you will now see. Effects of the 19th century regulation. When child labour was regulated in 1833, which was the first time in the UK, the intent was good. It freed young children from the burden of financially contributing to the family through exploitative jobs in factories. However, with more free time to spend alone, children were taking to the streets and staying longer in the company of their colleagues. Children could exchange pranks and, without supervision, experiment with what they otherwise wouldn't do. Also, since children no longer work and earn income, families missed the extra income to be financially stabilised. This led to an increase in petty crimes, including theft, as the working-class youths needed to get for themselves whatever their parents couldn't afford. These children gradually resorted to devious attempts to outsmart authority. They enjoyed sharing the spoils, which initially included food and cigarettes. As this was being transferred from generation to generation, the small crimes and pranks, together with the deviance of authority, transformed real crimes. While petty crime rose everywhere in the UK and beyond during the 19th century, the types and rates of crimes differed from city to city. Many of those crimes gangs were initially localised and territory-based. It was during the 20th century that certain ethnic or religious affiliations became the defining characteristics of gangs. You can quickly point to Bengal Tigers as an example, whose base was on Bengal Street in Manchester. Also, the word hooliganism initially conveyed the idea of the type of crimes committed by working-class youths. Press and others were so much concerned by this during that time. Those engaging in petty crimes in those days were known as scuttlers. Though not highly organised at first, they succeeded in having people drift in and out of membership. Yet they formed the foundation for more organised crime groups that gained a lot of notoriety throughout the 20th century and that have continued to increase in relevance with ever-growing concerns. Crime gangs in urban centres of the UK. Today, in major urban centres, gangs have established themselves and carved out territories. Among those places with noticeable crime presence are Belfast, Birmingham, Glasgow, Liverpool, London and Manchester. Let's take a closer look at the activities of crime gangs in each of these places. 1. Belfast, Northern Ireland. In 2003, it was estimated that there were 80 gangs in Belfast. These are among the over 150 active criminal gangs recorded in 2014 in Northern Ireland. Most of these gangs are nominally sectarian and engaged in racketeering in Belfast. According to an investigation in 2014, some of the Belfast gangs were hostile towards non-white residents. There have been numerous reports of crime gangs attacking, intimidating, extorting, and somehow targeting people of other races. The activities of these gangs in Belfast include smuggling and human trafficking. In the past, these gangs were plying their illegal trade on the street, but in recent years they have moved indoors, taking crimes to residential homes and hotels. They are now more organised with links and networks to aid their criminality. The Chinese and Eastern European descents have been held responsible for facilitating these criminal networks in Northern Ireland as a whole. 2. Birmingham, England. Back in the 1870s, crime gangs such as Cheapside Sloggers and Peaky Blinders had been operating in Birmingham. These are the earliest criminal gangs in the area. While Cheapside Sloggers originated earlier in the century as a specific gang, the term sloggers, which means fighters, later became a generic label. It was towards the end of the century that Peaky Blinders emerged on Adderley Street in the city's extremely deprived areas. The gang was sectorial in its activities. Notorious members of the crime gang included David Taylor, who was sentenced when 13 for carrying a gun, baby-faced Harry Fowles, Stephen McNichol and Ernest Haynes. One of the crime gangs that emerged early in the 20th century in Birmingham was Brummagem Boys. You remember people of Birmingham are called Brummies. The gang took their crime from the street to everywhere in England, no thanks to the greatly improved transport. Brummagem boys were the first of the gangs that expanded beyond the street, breeding them. Toward the late 20th century, following the 1985 Handsworth riots, another gang emerged named Johnson Crew. Owing their name to the Johnson's Cafe hangout, the group that started with petty crime and robbery later became a drug market. Another crime gang, Burger Bar Boys, was formed from the faction of the Johnson Crew and took their name from a fast food joint at Soho Road. Expectedly, there was a violent feud between the two gangs, which was later resolved, and the two gangs grew to be known as a super gang. 3. Glasgow, Scotland. Even Scotland has had a history of crime gangs since the 18th century. Gang criminal activities have been felt since the 1850s. The penny mobs reared its head out full in the 1870s as a result of an influx of Irish immigration. By early in the 20th century, many Glasgow gangs were rated as mere fighting gangs and not criminal gangs, though they were extorting and protecting rackets. That led to Glasgow acquiring a reputation as a hotbed of gang violence in Britain. Some of these gangs are referred to as Glasgow razor gangs since they used that weapon. Among the crime gang of that time was Billy Boys, formed in 1924 by William Fullerton as a sectarian anti-Catholic gang. This gang and others like the Norman Conks in the East End of Glasgow were both sectarian and territorial. The movies Small Faces and Neds portray the growth of criminal enterprises of the 20th century. An increase in Pakistani gangs in South Glasgow came to the spotlight following the racially motivated murder of Chris Donald by some Pakistanis in 2004. 4. Liverpool, England. Liverpool has been coping with the existence of street gangs since the mid-19th century, with various sectarian and political gangs around the city during that period. Fast forward to near the end of the 20th century in the 1980s, Liverpool had become known in the media as Smack City or Skag City. This followed an explosion in organised gang crime experienced in the city and heroin abuse within its more deprived areas. About this time, several criminal gangs began metamorphosizing into drug-dealing cartels in Liverpool. The first example of that was the Liverpool Mafia, the first such cartel in the UK. Over time, several Liverpool-based gangsters became super wealthy. Colin Smigger Smith, for instance, had an estimated fortune of £200 million. Curtis Cocky Warren once made the list of the Sunday Times Rich List. In 1996, when gangster David Ungi was shot, 6 shootings occurred in 7 days. Merseyside police, realising the high levels of violence by crime gangs in Liverpool, resorted to carrying weapons openly in the fight against gun crime. 5. London, England. The activities of crime gangs in London are simply commensurate with its history, population and economy. Often referred to as mobs, street gangs operating in London in the 20th century included Aldgate Mob, Bethnal Green Mob, Hoxton Mob, the Yiddishers, Watney Streetners, Whitechapel Mob and the organised Italian Mob under the leadership of Charles Sabini. Around 2017, there were 169 separate crime gangs, including Ghetto Boys and Peckham Boys in London, and they had committed all sorts of crimes, including murders. 6. Manchester, England. Scuttlers were the first recorded crime gang members in Manchester. That's where the gang was born. The city was dubbed Gangchester and Gunchester sometime in the mid-1980s because of a growth in violence among black British youths. These came from the west of the Alexandra Park estate in the south of the city. West Indians, their northern rival, began to gain media attention. The shooting of the 15-year-old Jesse James on September 9, 2006, the conviction of 11 members of the Gooch Gang on April 2006, and the long-standing rivalry with equally well-known Doddington Gang are among the news about Manchester crime gangs hitting the headlines. Our knowledge of these crime gangs in the UK should increase our safety awareness. Please let this discussion continue by telling us what you feel about this content or topic. Thank you for watching this video. Please don't forget to subscribe, comment and turn on the notification bell.